with Meredith Ward, the Deputy Executive Director of the National Association of State CIOs. Thanks so much for taking the time here at the inaugural StateRAMP Cyber Summit. It's great to catch up with you.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
The one thing that stands out when we talk about cybersecurity and when you talk about StateRAMP and all the things that brings is this idea of procurement and cybersecurity, the overlap that's happening. For years, cybersecurity was like, oh, let's put a bunch of clauses at the end of a contract, and by the way, contractor X or Y, figure it out. There's a much more different focus on cybersecurity and procurement. What are you seeing at the state level and the local level? What's NASCIO looking at in that world?
So I would say that cyber in the procurement process was also one of those afterthoughts. And, unfortunately, I still hear some horror stories in states about that, where the entire process gets through and then someone says, okay, CISO, check this box and say that we're secure. But, the good news is what I am seeing out of states, CISOs working with their chief procurement officers is making sure that cyber is baked in from the front, from the beginning, and that cybersecurity is paid for, because that's also a huge issue, right? If you wait until the very end, when all the decisions have been made, it can't just be an add-on or a check the box.
There's two pieces there, the baked in piece, and then there's the paid for piece.
Sure.
Let's dig into each of those. The baked in piece, when we always we've heard over the last 20 years, baked in, not bolted on. So is that baked into the requirements, into the documents, into all the above?
Absolutely. So from the time that, it's the procurement process, we call it acquisition, the entire process of which procurement is one part. And so from the time an idea or a need is had by an agency, we want that agency to be thinking of, okay, how does cybersecurity fit into this? How are we secure? And how do we, when the process gets further down, how do we ensure that the provider, the third-party provider, has secure practices and things that kind of, get along with the state and what the state's cybersecurity posture and program is?
The secure practices is something we've seen a lot at the federal level.
Yeah.
The Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agencies talks a lot about secure by design.
Right.
How are you seeing that kind of floating down into the state level? Is that starting to get talked about a lot?
It is, and I think that, the most important thing is that our security offices and our procurement offices are on the same page. And, we can't expect our procurement offices to know every single thing about cybersecurity. It's not their job. So what we do is encourage our CISOs to have conversations with folks in procurement and really lay out why this is important, what they can do to protect the state. And so everyone is on the same page. There's still a lot of room to grow, a lot of room for improvement. But, as every project in state government now tends to have a technology component to it. And, that's one thing that we talk about a lot at NASCIO is how do you define a technology procurement? There is going to be a cybersecurity aspect of it. So this is something that we're only going to see more of. So what we really do is encourage everybody to have conversations and to educate each other on why it's important.
The conversations between CISOs and chief procurement officers or the procurement staff more generally, how does NASCIO help kind of bridge those gaps? Do you work, obviously there's the National Association of State Procurement Officers, NASPO.
Yeah.
Do you all work with them and or others to say, hey, we need to bring these two communities closer together?
Absolutely. NASCIO has had a long-standing partnership with NASPO, and in fact, they just wrapped up their conference in the same city yesterday, and I know it was a good one. But we started in 2016 officially partnering with NASPO. We've released publications on the negotiation process, on different aspects of the procurement process. So our big thing, again, has been building that relationship between the procurement office and the CIO office. And we really think that that's the best way to get to move in the right direction and to make progress.
Because so many times it's the people at the high level, the CISO and the CPO can talk and yeah, we should work together, but it's how does it flow down?
Exactly.
And I think the flow down is where things tend to fall apart, maybe is a little too strong, but that cyber box we didn't check well.
Right.
Are there things that you're seeing within the states or within things that you were doing with NASPO to help that flow down, the training of the workforce?
So I think the most important thing and one of NASCIO's key messages is that cybersecurity is a team sport. It's everyone's responsibility. Yeah. And so, our procurement folks are part of the state workforce. We're hoping that they are educated on cybersecurity. We know that over half of states have mandated cybersecurity training, but all states offer it to employees. So, but with our procurement folks, it takes a little bit of extra time to, again, explain all these things, because there's no one else but the CISO who it's their job to know all of these things, right? And so they have to educate and again, build those relationships. So, if there's any procurement folks watching or folks in the CIO office, I would say if you don't think there's a relationship at the top, build your own. Reach out to someone in the procurement office. And I would say the same thing again to a procurement a person. I'm from Kentucky. I say folks a lot. So
the workforce piece goes beyond just cybersecurity,
right,
and the cyber procurement side. I think every organization, public sector, private sector, is struggling to hire the right people, enough people. What are some of the ways that NASCIO is starting to say, okay, how do we help the state and local governments find, train, upskill, reskill employees?
So I'm glad you asked that. And as you know, we do a state CIO survey every single year. We also do a cyber study with our CISOs every other year. So this is the year that both of those are coming out. And so, what we asked our CISOs and our CIOs, we've taken salary out of the conversation. We're saying, besides salary, what is going to help this conversation? Because we know that the public sector is never going to be able to pay what the private sector can. And we also challenge our folks to, realize you aren't the private sector. We're different and we're special, and there's so many things in the public sector that you can do. So anyway, when we asked that question to our CIOs and our CISOs, one of the big things was aligning job titles and classifications more to the private sector. If you have a job description that's System Security Administrator 2, well, what does that mean? Okay. We also, so funny, years ago, a CIO told me when they had to officially apply for the job, CIOs are appointed, they were filling out paperwork that the job application asked how many words per minute they type. I don't know about you. I have no idea what mine is. But I think modernizing a lot of those things. In fact, I just spoke to a public sector HR group last week, and we talked a lot about that. So there's a lot of things that states can do to help attract cyber talent.
I had to laugh at the words per minute. I remember putting that on resumes very early on in my career.
Right?
Typing 50 words per minute.
Exactly.
And now nobody cares anymore.
Yeah.
Even if you can't type, you're on a keyboard enough that you've hacked yourself.
Exactly.
It's a great memory in a weird way.
Yeah.
But I do love the fact that this aligning job titles and classifications with the private sector. You're right. I mean, if I'm in the private sector, I'm looking to maybe change my career, meaning I'm still in security or I'm still in technology, modernization, but I want to try the public sector. What the heck is X or Y? I can't relate to it.
Right.
If I could say, okay, that's a project manager, that's a product manager, there's some, I think I'm qualified.
Right.
Is that just for lack of a better word, the culture of the state and local government, federal, I'm sure too, that has to come back around, or is there something else that has to get done?
That's pretty much it. And as you know, sometimes I joke that changing culture and changing hearts and minds is sometimes even more difficult than passing legislation. I don't know, we could probably debate that. But, what I have seen a lot of states is we understand if there needs to be internal job titles, right? What we have seen is some states who might have an internal job title, but then on the external job posting, there's something that's a little bit more, okay, we know what this is. The other thing that we didn't talk about earlier is the time to hire it could be 6+ or more months. We're especially seeing that in the mid to upper level cyber jobs. The entry level cyber jobs, those aren't as hard to fill, right? For states, it's folks who they've gotten a lot of certifications, they've gotten some experience under their belt, and the state really wants to keep them, but the private sector is offering, 5,000 times their salary. So it is a challenge for our states.
And I think it's not going to get easier. And I think that's why there's a big focus on, okay, well, what's the skill set do we have today of our current employees? And how do we, one, get them off of the low skill or the mundane work.
Sure.
And that's where sometimes the technology side of the discussion comes in, the automation,
Sure.
robotics process automation. I'll say those two letters that nobody wants to hear anymore, AI.
Right.
But it also allows you then to go, okay, I no longer have to worry about this over here.
Right.
A lot of the cybersecurity side and focus on the stuff that really is more meaningful. Is that conversation also happening at the states to get folks? Because in the federal level, that was a big push several years ago, and it still is today.
No, 100%. And I think, it's funny around NASCIO, we say there's Gen AI and then traditional old AI that's been around for years. And so in the cybersecurity space, states have been using traditional old AI for years to spot patterns and, different things like that. With the advent of Gen AI, what we have heard, and we released a study in the spring about this, most of our state CIO staff, they're pretty excited. And when I say state CIO staff, that includes CISO staff, because all but 2 report to the CIO in the states. But they're really excited about those things that you said, freeing up their time to get rid of the mundane tasks. So I think there's some trepidation maybe in some workers in other departments. But when you can see some of the exciting things that Gen AI can do, I think it's pretty cool. But also not forgetting the guardrails and that Gen AI is a fairly new still instrument, and just to be cautious. So most of our states have put out a policy, safety guidelines, things like that.
We could talk a lot about AI.
Sure.
I'm excited to read the state NASCIO CIO survey that's coming, as well as the cyber survey that's coming. So a lot coming up. So the last question, the getaway question, if you will, I'll ask you is, as you look into 2025, what are you most excited about in the state and local world when it comes to this world of technology that we live in?
So I am most excited about the continuation of state and local collaboration. So being here at StateRAMP, we had a state and local CISO symposium yesterday, and I was lucky enough to sit in on that. And so many discussions from, I don't know who my state CISO is, to my state CISO is the first person that I call when something goes wrong. Or these days, maybe it's email, I guess, not call. But I'm very excited about that and about continuing collaboration, because we know that the bad actors, they don't care if you're with this city or this state or this county, they're attacking everyone. And so no longer can we rest in these silos. Sometimes we call them silos of excellence at NASCIO, but we really can't do that anymore. So I'm an eternal optimist. We'll see what 2025 brings.
I think we're all eternal optimists. That's why we get into what we do.
Absolutely.
Meredith Ward is the Deputy Executive Director of the National Association of State CIOs. Meredith, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.